It's the amazing. Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Yeah! How are y'all doing? Welcome to a happy edition of Rico Brogna. The New York Mets sweep the worst team in the history of baseball, the Chicago White Sox. They get a little bit of extra inning help from the Philadelphia Phillies, and just 3.5 days removed from the season being effectively over after that brutal loss to the Arizona Diamondbacks, the New York Mets respond. They respond with 4 consecutive wins. They responded with that rubber game victory against Arizona. They respond by winning 3 against the White Sox. They get a little bit of help along the way. And now the Mets are 1 game back of the Atlanta Braves for the 3rd and final wild card spot, all while completing a remarkable 7-3 road trip that should have been 9-1. I mean, really, it should have been. But we can't complain because the Mets did what they needed to do. And in honor of this wonderful occasion, if you're viewing the Rico Brogna as opposed to listening to it, I decided to light up the Mets sign that usually sits behind me here in the official Rico Brogna studios. So it's a special occasion. We lit the lamp, if you will. So I've got this Mets sign. I have no idea where I got it. In fact, I think my dad got it many, many years ago from a bar. He is a certified public accountant, so I think one of the bars gave him a gift and said, here's this light up Mets sign. And he put it away, and it was in the attic for many, many years. And then when I bought a house with my wife a few years ago, he's like, would you like this light up Mets sign? And I said, of course. And it's really never been lit up. But Hoff and I were talking, and we're like, you know what? Why not for this occasion? Why not for the occasion of the Mets surviving and sweeping the Chicago White Sox? Do we not light up the Met lamp or sign or whatever the hell you want to call it? So for those watching on YouTube, we lit, baby.
Well, let's be serious, Ev. How often do the Mets do what they're supposed to do?
Never.
Not very often. So this is a special occasion, and God bless the lit up Mets.
It is a special occasion, and let's address the fact that this was ugly. Let's get that all out of the way. And we talked about that during the Saturday night version of Rico Brogna / Sunday morning after the Mets won game 2 of this series, that it wasn't pretty. There was some nerve-wracking moments, but a win's a win's a win. And you look at the final game of this series, game 3 of this series against Chicago, it was very similar in that there were a lot of negatives if you're looking for them. There were a lot of things that were very frustrating, but ultimately they won the game. And that's the most important thing. And I think the most negative thing we saw from these 3 games against Chicago that clearly is going to have to change as they get a step up in competition taking on the Red Sox over the next 3 days at Citi Field is they are striking out at a ridiculous pace. This is something we've talked about. It's not new. But if you look at Sunday's game, and it wasn't just Garrett Crochet who got off to the incredible start, striking out the first 7 batters, they let Prelander Baroa strike out 5 guys in his 2 innings of work. And that was really the most frustrating thing about the Sunday game. The Mets were fortunate. I mean, let's admit it, fortunate that the White Sox, I'm up here, Jet, by the way. Jet, I'm doing the Rico if you want to come up. All right, pal? I'm right here, man. Hold on one second. I'll take over for a minute.
No,
fell asleep in the other room. He was a little nervous. I'll be back in a minute. All right, pal?
There's no reason to be nervous about this, Rico, because let's be serious. I know that he wants to tank and everyone wants to take on the fact that this was a tough weekend. The fact that it was not as smooth as the Mets would have liked it. But the fact is that they did their job. I don't care how freaking tough it is Sometimes, let's be serious. They go up up against a guy named Martin, who has played a few games in this league. And listen, let's be. Oh, he's back. Look at is Jet comfortable?
Well, here's what happened. So we celebrated Labor Day. We did a Labor Day thing. I actually didn't watch this Met game. I'm out of breath right now because I just carried him.
Oh, wait.
We celebrate.
You didn't watch the Mets game?
No, I did. I'm going to get to it. Of course I watched the Mets game. What kind of comment is that, Pete? We celebrated Labor Day, went over a friend's house, swam in the pool, and we got back to my house at about 9 o'clock at night. And I was so proud of something. I was proud that I had no idea what happened in the game. And that was a really good accomplishment because the people's house we were at are not just Met fans, but they're diehard Met fans. And so what I said, sorry, I am so out of shape because literally I picked up my son and carried him like 10 feet up a little flight of stairs to the Rico studios. And I'm out of it. Hey, this is what happens when we're live, baby. So I asked the woman, the mother of the friend that we were hanging out with, I said, look, obviously you could watch the Met game. I'm not here to tell you anything, but I'm going to try to DVR it. So just don't tell me anything. And she's like, yeah, no problem. I'm going to watch it on my phone. I said, that's fine. I respect that, of course. Poker face me. Just don't tell me anything. And she said, you got it. And she did a great job. Now, I was also fathering. I had my 2 sons with me. We're in the pool. We're hanging out. And I got through that entire day with no idea what happened in the game. So when I got back, I watched the game at about 9 o'clock, scored the game, which is why we're doing such a late edition of Rico Brogna. It's Labor Day. Hoff's having a good time. But I just literally finished the game. Like, as we're talking about this right now, I just finished. So while I was watching the game, my oldest son fell asleep in the room where we were watching the game. And so I go up and do the Rico, and he woke up like, what the hell is going on? Why am I here alone? And that's what just happened. So I just explained everything in about 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Which, by the way, I respect Jeff for what he's going through right now, because if I woke up randomly and no one was around me, I'd be freaked the hell out too.
Oh, I know.
It's a beautiful room. It's a huge TV, and there's plenty of space for people to be around. So if no one's around, it's ridiculous. And by the way, God bless you, because I was around people, and I was like, dude, I'm not watching the game. I got to do a podcast a little bit later on, and everyone was telling me the score left and right. I mean, they were going through everything. They would tell me how great Edwin Diaz was. I'm like, dude, give me a freaking break. Relax.
Yeah. Dude, it's not that. That's why I'm so stunned I was able to do it, because when you're around people, and look, most people are just going to say, tell me what's going on in the game, or the game's going to be on some kind of TV, and maybe you'll see it in passing. I'd prefer not to do that. Like, honestly, I want to watch every pitch of Met games, but also be a decent father and a decent husband. And so on a Labor Day Sunday, I'm certainly not telling my wife and kids we're staying home to watch Mets White Sox. I'm not going to do that. So you go out and you do things, but then you try to balance it. At least I try to balance it with DVR. And I hand it to this woman. I hand it to the family. They never told me a damn thing. I got in the car driving back. I was out on Long Island. I got in the car and I said it to my wife. I said, I can't believe that I haven't been spoiled about anything. And it gave me great joy, because then I'm able to come home, take my scorebook out, and watch the Met game and watch it without any kind of barriers. So that's a little bit about my Labor Day. And now Jet is calm and he's in the official Rico Brogna studios, and we can continue. So the Mets are striking at a crazy pace. I think that's the point. And we have talked about that for a while, that their strikeouts are way up. And it wasn't simply Garrett Crochet who got off to the incredible start. I mean, Garrett Crochet looked unhittable. And yeah, the Mets are fortunate that the White Sox are handling him with such care. We talked about it on the last Rico, that they're basically having him throw 55, 60 pitches. If you look at his last 5-6 starts, he only threw 57 in this game. And while the Mets eventually got to him with Lindor hitting the home run, and they put together a little bit of a rally in that 4th inning, when he comes out of the game, little did we know that the White Sox bullpen was going to shut the Mets down. And that's the negative I'm talking about. When you get Crochet out of the game after he strikes out the first 7 hitters, and retires the first 9 with such ease. I mean, complete, utter dominance. And Lindor hits the home run to start the 4th. You get the infield hit by Jose Iglesias, which he has perfected in his time with the Mets. How many of his hits have been infield hits? And then you get the base hit by Mark Vientos. You're set up for a big inning. And even after Crochet struck out Pete Alonso, when Grady Sizemore's taking him out, I'm laughing, thinking to myself, all right, now I got nothing to worry about. Because while it's still only a 1-0 game, the White Sox bullpen is trash. Now, granted, the White Sox are pretty much trash at everything. But as you've certainly seen throughout this series, and you look at the numbers, because we're not sitting there watching White Sox games all season long, their bullpen is a hot mess. There's no excuse not to just destroy this Chicago bullpen. And the Mets kind of failed to do it all weekend long. And when you go back to that 4th inning, you're up 1-0. Sure, Michelle Manaea looks great, but you never know how this game is going to transpire. And you have 1st and 3rd and nobody out with the heart of the order coming up, and you can't score a freaking run. That's ugly. And we saw a lot of that this weekend. And I don't mean to bring up the negatives, but we're talking about it. We're being honest about this series and how it wasn't sheer dominance. It wasn't sheer the Mets just bludgeoning the Chicago White Sox. There was a lot of bad. And I bring up the bad only because it needs to change. It can't continue in the series against Boston and Cincinnati. Just can't. You can get away with it when you're playing a team that's now 31-107, which is just insane that that's their record. But you go back to the 4th inning, you have 1st and 3rd, nobody out. Alonso strikes out. He had a really rough game on Sunday, 0 for 4 with 3 strikeouts. You've got Jesse Winker very quickly coming off the bench, which I thought was interesting. Once Sizemore took Crochet out of the game, and then you've got JD flying out. It was a missed opportunity. You go to the 5th inning, leadoff man on. He's thrown out trying to steal. They get the next guy on. They can't score. You go back to the 7th inning, leadoff walk. They can't score. And you're also facing Gus Varland and Jared Schuster and Prelander Baroa. So combination of 2 things that was less than ideal in this game. Striking out at a pace that's been insane really over the last month, something that's not new to us, but certainly jumped out in this game when they struck out. Hold on, let me write this down. 16 times. They struck out 16 times against Crochet, Varland, Schuster, Baroa, and Anderson. And also their inability to get the big hit. They finally broke it open with the Marte RBI double. Broke it open. They made a 1-0 game, 2-0. But their offense failing to really take advantage of opportunities was a frustrating thing throughout this 3-game series. I said this after game 2, and I can certainly say this after game 3. They left a lot of guys on base and left a lot of runs that were there for them that they didn't take. That's the bad news. But let's get to the good news about this. Sean Manaea. Wow. And I know what he's doing to a lot of people listening right now. I know what he's probably doing to Joe Beningo. And I'm going to call him up in the next few days to confirm that I know he's thinking this, which is, bro, we should sign this guy long term. And I think he's enamoring all of us with how ridiculously dominant he's been over the last month. The line of demarcation being making adjustments after watching Chris Sale pitch and saying, wow, maybe I can change my arm angle a little bit and imitate Chris Sale, who's had a Cy Young caliber year. But in a lot of ways, this was as dominant as we've seen Sean Manaea. 1-2-3 first inning, 1-2-3 second inning, 1-2-3 third inning. He retires the first 2 guys in the 4th inning, so he's got 11 up, 11 down. Second time in a couple of weeks in which he's had that early flirtation with a perfect game. By the way, I'm sitting there on DVR 7 hours later, as I just described, as he's got 11 up, 11 down. I'm thinking to myself, really? Can you imagine this actually happens? I knew it wasn't going to happen, but I'm thinking, imagine this happens. I'm going to call Pete Hoffman at 11:30 at night and say, yeah, I know I'm late to the party, but perfect game, Rico. Let's go. I knew he wasn't going to do it, and I knew he's never going to do it because Manaea, as dominant as he can look at times, will wear down. And we actually saw that in this game. But after he walks Sosa, we see Sean Manaea with the dirtiest but most awesome pickoff move we've ever seen. Andy Pettitte style, in which it's a balk, but it's never called. And that's how he wipes out the one base runner against him. Gives up a 2-out hit in the 5th, gets through it, pitches a 1-2-3 6th. 7th inning. This is where I thought, wow, Sean Manaea may actually be able to go 8 or 9. He's got a pitch count that's low. The hit by pitch is wiped away because Luis Torrens has an absolute cannon behind the plate. How great has he been throwing out base runners? More on that in a few minutes. And there are 2 outs and nobody on with, I think it was a 2-2 count on Andrew Vaughn. And Manaea's pitch count is low enough where the thought is, wow, he gets Vaughn here. Manaea could come out for the 8th inning with a 1-0 lead. And a few times where Manaea's been pushed. I think Mendy's pushed him thinking, let me get another inning out of my starter. I've got a big lead. He could afford to make a mistake. 1-0 game. You have Edwin Diaz available. You can't play that game with a 1-run lead where you're just trying to push for the extra inning, knowing, you know what? I don't know how much Sean Manaea has left. Before he walked Vaughn, it looked as if Manaea was going to give him the best opportunity to get 3 outs in the 8th inning. But it really appeared, and Mendy confirmed this after the game, as if Manaea ran out of gas. He walked Vaughn. He gave up that little blue pit to Gavin Sheets, but it was a long at-bat. It was another 3-2 count. And then he falls behind Miguel Vargas. And when he fell behind Miguel Vargas 3-1, and the bullpen starts to get busy, Reed Garrett was warming up. Manaea was about to face his last hitter. He loses Vargas. We're staring at bases loaded, 2 outs. And I think he would have gone to Garrett even though Fletcher was a left-hand hitter. Because I think at that point, you got to throw out lefty-righties and you got to go with the best possible arm. And at that point, it looked like Manaea was tired. But he was able to make the big pitch when he needed to, behind 3-1. Sure, it helps that you're doing it against a guy hitting 170. That's the beauty of facing the Chicago White Sox. But what a tremendous outing by Sean Manaea. 7 innings, 2 hits, no runs, 5 strikeouts, a little bit lower than he's had recently. But Manaea continues to be a 7-inning machine for this Met rotation. What a 1-2 punch right now of Sean Manaea and David Peterson. Can't believe I uttered that sentence. Who the hell would have thought any of us would have ever uttered the sentence, what a 1-2 punch, Sean Manaea and David Peterson.
And I got to be honest with you, Ev. I mean, I don't want to sit there and say that it's a guarantee, but the fact that Sean Manaea has pitched as well as he has, he's not a top Cy Young candidate, but he's actually in the mix. Am I wrong with that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. You and Loogie do this with the in the mix thing. Like, is Sean Manaea going to win the National League Cy Young? No. So then what the hell's the difference?
Don't lump me with Loogie. That's all I'm going to say. You can say whatever I want. We might have the same ideas, but don't lump me with Loogie. Dude, he's pitched well enough. He's done, like, you compare him to other pitchers in the league. I mean, he's been consistent. He's got a month. He's got a month left. If this month continues the same way, you can legitimately put him up there as a Cy Young contender. No doubt about it.
Not really. I mean, is he up there with Chris Sale? Probably not. Is he up there with Zach Wheeler? What?
He stole his style. So yes, he definitely.
He may have stole Chris Sale's style. Look, I guess I get your point. If you're a believer in top 10 vote getters for a Cy Young or top 7 vote getters in a Cy Young, I can't argue with you about that. I just think Chris Sale and Zach Wheeler are so, even Michael King, your Michael King side, I think those guys are still significantly ahead of Sean Manaea, but he's thrown 150 innings, which is a really good number. You know, this isn't 10 years ago. 150 innings, and he still has a handful of starts left this season. And you look amongst the league leaders in innings pitched, Logan Webb is number 1 at 183. Aaron Nola's at 172. Zach Wheeler, who we were just talking about, is at 167. It's not bad. It's not bad. It's not a bad number. So he's had a really, really good year. His ERA continues to go down, but no, he's not. He's not in the Cy Young mix. I'm sorry. I think you're just really excited about how well he's pitched, and that's fine. He's pitched incredibly well, but now that I'm really looking at it, I don't even think he'd be in the top 7.
All right. How about this? Let's take it back and say he's the Cy Young of the Mets.
Yeah, I'll give you that. I'll give you. By the way, when the season is over, we have so many off-season Ricos. I think half the audience probably won't listen to those. But hey, you're more than welcome to anyone listening now during regular season Rico. And I know that one of those off-season Ricos will be handing out the full season awards, and there will be a Mets Cy Young Award, which Sean Manaea is the heavy favorite to win. David Peterson, unfortunately, missed so much time. He's going to have a tough time kind of stealing that award. Earlier this year, it looked like Luis Severino. But look, point well taken. Right now, Sean Manaea is pitching as well as anybody. You know, I think that's the kind of easy, concise way to say it. There are very few pitchers in Major League Baseball right now in this moment pitching as well as Sean Manaea. And he gave him another 7 beautiful innings. How about Reed Garrett, though? And I don't want to minimize. I'm being careful with this. I don't want to minimize anything the Mets did in this 3-game series by saying, but it's the White Sox. I don't want to do that. You know, we're going to talk about the good things they've done, as we already have. We'll talk about the bad things, like striking out a million times, like leaving countries on base. All of that's true, and I don't want to minimize Reed Garrett pitching a 1-2-3 inning, protecting a 1-0 lead in the bottom of the 8th inning, and dismiss it by saying, yeah, but it was the bottom of the Chicago White Sox order. I don't think that's fair. Certainly, you can look at the hitters and say they stink, but nevertheless, Reed Garrett has been very inconsistent. And in this game, an important game, we all acknowledge, he went out there and pitched a 1-2-3 inning. I thought the insurance run in the 9th inning was also really important. Starling Marte hitting an RBI double. The Mets putting together a 2-out rally that started with J.D. Martinez drawing a walk. We saw Pablo Reyes make his Met debut. He was not on any of our bingo cards for the September call-up, but it makes sense. It does make sense. When we talked about a September call-up, I guess it was 3 or 4 Ricos ago. I lose track. It seems like we do Rico Brognas every day. So I forget which Rico this happened on. But we were talking about the September call-up, and my point was, what is the position player September call-up's job going to be? And to me, it's being a pinch runner. That's it. It's not starting games. It's not being a bat off the bench. That doesn't fit. Look at their roster. Look what they have. It was always a speed guy. So if you want Luis Angel Acuna to be that guy, totally fine, but it's got to be a speed guy. Pablo Reyes, a veteran, guy with major league experience, relatively a speed guy. I mean, he didn't look to steal when he pinch ran for J.D. Martinez, which sort of disappointed me with 2 outs and a runner on first. But even though he wasn't looking to steal, when Marte hits the double over Luis Roberts' head, J.D. Martinez is not scoring on that play. Pablo Reyes is. And that run is scored because the Mets were able to use a legitimate pinch runner for J.D. Martinez. They wouldn't have really had one without a September call-up, because at that point in the game, your only options to pinch run would be Jeff McNeil and Francisco Alvarez, not exactly speed demons. So that's where Pablo Reyes makes sense, even if he's not a household name. But a huge RBI double by Starling Marte. And then Edwin Diaz, what a response to the blown save against Arizona. I mean, major props to Edwin Diaz for what this guy has done. He comes out in Game 3 of Arizona series, protects a lead. He pitches on Friday night against Chicago with a 4-run lead, looks great. And then against the top of the White Sox order, strikeout, strikeout, strikeout. An absolutely awesome response by Edwin Diaz to the season-ending blown save of Wednesday night. And you have yourself a 2-0 victory. Manaea, Garrett, Diaz, Lindor home run, RBI double, Starling Marte. Bada boom, bada bang, the Mets sweep the Chicago White Sox. Luis Torrens, let me spend a few minutes on him, and then I got a lot of emails we'll get to, and we'll preview this series coming up against Boston. Luis Torrens hasn't hit much. Did have a hit in this game, a little blooper towards first base, but he hasn't hit much over the last month. He is putting together as impressive a run of throwing out base runners as I think I've ever seen in Met history. I was actually racking my brain about this. The Mets have had a pretty good amount of catchers over the years, like some good catchers, mostly offensive catchers when you think of Mike Piazza and you think of Todd Hundley and you think of the big 06 year that Paul LaDuca had. But think for a second about defense. And I know the stolen base has sort of been eliminated from baseball over the last 10 years, and maybe that's why it's tough to think of this. The stolen base has come back because of the rule changes. Bigger bag, a capped amount of times you can pick a guy off, so we all know why, but stolen bases are coming back. And Luis Torrens has somehow thrown out 12 of 20 base runners, and the caught stealing against Robert in the 7th inning was so impressive for two reasons. Number one, the throw was nuts. It was an absolute piss missile to second base. A great tag by Iglesias, too. I don't want to downgrade that. But think about the spot it came in. Runner on first, nobody out, 1-0 game. I mean, that's a huge play. And Francisco Alvarez, not to pick on him, puts that ball in center field in all likelihood. And so you're looking at a runner on third, nobody out, protecting a 1-0 lead as compared to 1 out and nobody on. Luis Torrens is arm behind the plate. And we'll spend more time on this in a few minutes because we did receive an interesting email, a few emails about it, Torrens versus Alvarez. And Hoff did an overnight the other night. And Pete doesn't realize that I actually listen, but I do listen. And Pete was going on a pretty passionate rant about the value of Francisco Alvarez when it comes to pitch framing. And by the way, spot on. Like, I'm not even arguing that. It's more, what do you value more when it comes to Torrens and Alvarez? And we'll get to that in a few minutes. But what a great throw in a big spot. In fact, let's get to it right now. All right? I'm going to read the email. I want to hear Pete's opinion because he's a big Francisco Alvarez guy in terms of pitch framing. But we'll hear from Howard, who wrote this email about Torrens versus Alvarez. Here we go. Evan and Pete, I know you agree with me that Torrens should play more, and today and this weekend proved it again. Luis Torrens threw out another base runner, and keep in mind the Red Sox are 8th in MLB with stolen bases, and the Reds are 2nd. This week, it's clear that Torrens should be playing 4 times and Alvarez twice. You also pointed the strikeouts of this team. Here are the numbers for the team as a whole. We are striking out the 3rd most in Major League Baseball post-All-Star game. The Braves and the Rockies are the only 2 teams striking out more. One more thing. The Mets struck out 106 times on the 10-game road trip. That's 10.6 per game in the 10 games, 45 runs scored, 30 runs allowed. So make your point about Alvarez's pitch framing, and then we'll kind of put it together on how they should handle this.
So the biggest part about Francisco Alvarez is basically, and this is not just, it's batter by batter, from what I understand. He's been able to get closer to the plate if he knows a batter is not going to swing at a frame that's going to touch his glove. So he's getting closer to the plate, and the umpire is getting closer to see the pitch, which is able to frame, and it's a quick frame. It's not setting up where it's like, hey, this is where I cut the ball. It's quick. It's I caught it, I put it where I needed to be, and back to the pitcher. And it's a very fast-paced, so the umpire has to make a call quicker than where other pitchers are doing. And it's a pacing, it's a spacing, it's everything. And I look at Francisco Alvarez, that key is different than everybody else. Plus, by the way, You're telling me he's not throwing out batters on the base. He's also keeping them at first base because he's also trying to get them there. So maybe he's not throwing out batters the way he should be, or people on base, but he's keeping them at first base. So that is significant. But between all of that, the main thing is if you compare him to other catchers, he is set up in a better position to give the pitcher, give the umpire a better call for the catcher.
Yeah, John Boyd did a great job, and Pete sent this to me a few days ago. It was really about the Orioles, and it was about that Oriole-Met series from a week and a half ago about a lot of the missed calls that was occurring against Baltimore on lower pitches that were just under the strike zone or right at the bottom half of the strike zone that were being called balls, while in the same game, those same pitches were being called strikes. And really what John Boy showed was it was all about Alvarez versus Rutschman. That's really what it was about, that Alvarez was doing such a brilliant job for a few reasons. You laid out a few of them, of stealing strikes. And if you look at pitch framing numbers, Alvarez is top 5 in baseball. So I will completely agree with you. And it's, tough to measure, but Baseball Savant does a pretty good job of it. Alvarez is stealing strikes. Now, the negative to that, and this is noticeable, and it should be called out, I don't want to ignore it, is that when you're trying to steal strikes the way Alvarez is, and a lot of other catchers are, you're actually committing pass balls and not blocking balls in the dirt. We've seen Alvarez kind of have his glove, try to frame a pitch, and then miss it. I mean, Alvarez has had a handful of pass balls over the last few weeks, and then also balls in the dirt he's not getting down on. So while you're stealing strikes, and that's a great thing, I'm not denying that. That's why it is an interesting debate when you think about the positives and negatives of each player. Alvarez is also, in doing so, committing more pass balls and not blocking enough balls in the dirt. That's the negative to the pitch framing that Alvarez is doing so brilliantly.
Well, also, that's also why catching interference takes place.
Yeah.
Because he's trying to put himself in a position to kind of like almost intercept the pitch while batters are trying to swing and hit the ball.
And that's the negative.
Yeah.
That's absolutely a negative. Catcher's interference is giving a base runner away. A wild pitch is giving, an extra base to a player, which we've seen a lot of. So I think when it comes down to defense, yes, Alvarez gives you that positive because he is stealing strikes throughout a game. He is also committing pass balls and wild pitches. He's not throwing guys out at second base. Luis Torrens is. Luis Torrens can shut down a running game. And it's a great point that Howard makes. And it is something that Mendy's got to think about when you're facing two teams, especially Cincinnati, who run a lot. I mean, the Red Sox have the third most stolen bases in the American League. That is a part of their game. And Luis Torrens right now is shutting down that aspect of a game. When it comes to the offense, we all know Alvarez isn't hitting, but neither is Torrens. Let's not act like Luis Torrens is the same guy he was a month and a half ago. Do you know how many hits he had in the month of August? 3. I think he was 3 for 28 in the month of August. He has not hit very much. He did have one base hit, the soft single here to start September. So why I lean towards Alvarez is that his bat is capable of getting red hot. We saw him at the game-winning home run against the Orioles. It hasn't turned into anything huge, but every once in a while he gives you that glimpse, that at-bat. Some at-bats we've pointed out, behind in the count, going to right field for a base hit. He still has that potential to get incredibly hot. So I think the way I would handle this, looking at these 6 games coming up against Boston and Cincinnati, point well taken about Cincinnati. I think I would lean towards Alvarez starting 2 of 3 against Boston, seeing where the bat takes him, and then potentially, if it doesn't get hot, Torrens getting 2 of 3 against Cincinnati. I think I'm looking, in my opinion, at more of a 50-50 split over these next 6 games. But Alvarez starting 2 of 3 against Boston. They're all night games, so you could easily play them all 3 if Mendy wants. They play Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, and Torrens is coming off playing a game on Sunday. So even with the quick travel, You fully expect Alvarez to be in the lineup Monday. It's all right-hand pitchers. They have an off day on Thursday, and then they play Friday night, Saturday at 4, Sunday at 1:30. I'm expecting Mendy's just going to play Alvarez. That's the track record. But I think based on his ability to completely shut down a run game, which Torrens again did in such a big spot against Chicago, I would lean towards more of a 50-50 split. Now, let me get to some more of your emails, the ricob@gmail.com. Casey writes, this was the oddest series I can remember in quite some time. I was never truly nervous, but I was also never truly comfortable. It was a must sweep, and history would dictate that we'd find a way to screw it up somehow. Maybe it's just the fragile psyche of being a Met fan, but this was the least satisfying 3-game road sweep in history. I almost couldn't even enjoy it because my alternative would have been a downright disaster. Obviously, it's great news they were able to take care of business, but there's a part of me that's relieved that it's time to go back to playing actual baseball teams. Let's hope they keep the intensity ramped up and continue to give us reasons to believe. All my prior points about the deadline stand, but I would be beyond thrilled to be wrong. It's up to them to prove it. There's a few things I agree with. The one thing I can't agree with is that it was the least satisfying 3-game road sweep. I feel pretty satisfied, despite all the flaws, in a big moment with the Braves actually losing a couple of games. The Mets went out and won 3 straight. I'm very satisfied right now.
The Mets are 1 game out of a playoff spot. I mean, you beg. There's been so many series where, like, oh, we have to do this. We have to do that. We said coming in here, they have to sweep
Yes.
the series. And they did that. That's what they did. How could you be upset?
No, you can't be upset. The part I agreed with was, yeah, there were moments of unease, I guess would be the way I'd phrase it, when Detroit, oh my God. Well, you know why I think Detroit? Because I think of the 03 Tigers for whatever reason, the other team that was historically bad in my lifetime. But when Chicago got the tying runs on base and the winning run at the plate on Saturday night, was there uneasiness? Absolutely. When Tyler McGill walked the first hitter he faced on Friday night and they're down 1-0 early, was there uneasiness? Absolutely. As Garrett Crochet is striking at everybody to start this game, was there a little bit of uneasiness? Yes, but I never fully thought they were going to lose. I was never panicked. So I do agree with that assessment that it wasn't a comfortable 3-game sweep. The Mets didn't bulldoze them by any stretch, but it was also never nerve-wracking to the point where, oh my God, they're going to lose. Oh my God, they're going to get swept. But now that it's over, as we sit here doing the Rico in the overnight hours, if you're live, I'm satisfied. I feel damn good. They won 3 games against the White Sox, and we move on. We never have to hear about them again. Speaking of the White Sox, Chris T brings up a point that I do want to address before we move on from ever talking about the Chicago White Sox again. And I want to read his whole point because it is before this game on Sunday. But listen with me. I'm about to turn on this last game of this series after listening to the Rico, as I usually do on my morning bike ride. Fully agree with all of your sentiments on how crucial this game is today, Sunday, against this terrible team. But I think you left one thing out. They need to add to the White Sox loss total as much as possible to do their part in removing the albatross of our franchise owning the worst record in history. I know they were lovable losers, and we will always have a special place for them in our hearts. But as a fan for 40 years now, I am tired of all the albatrosses we wear around our necks. 07 and 08, etc. I don't need to rehash it. So for Casey and all those men that brought the Mets into the world in 1962, let's see these guys hang one more on this awful team and get them much closer to breaking the record. Let's go Mets, Chris. I was asked a few days ago for my opinion, which I thought was interesting because I am very young. I don't remember the 1962 Mets. But Tim Britton wrote a piece in The Athletic about the White Sox chasing the 62 Mets. And he reached out and said, what do you think? Like I'm asking Met fans and guys in the media and Howie Roses of the world, do you want the White Sox to break this record? And I don't know if you guys read the article, but I'll repeat the sentiment that I gave to Tim, which is actually very different than what Chris said. At the end of the day, I'm not going to lose any sleep. At the end of the day, I don't think I'm going to be glued to the final few regular season games of the Chicago White Sox to see if they lose 120 games or not. But if it was up to me, I kind of like the 62 Mets having the record. It's not going to kill me if the White Sox lose 125 games, which is actually their pace right now. But I grew up, I think a lot of us did, with stories of the 62 Mets, the lovable losers that they were. So having a team that is certainly not lovable losers, I don't think any team ever will match the lovableness of a team that's an expansion team with a bunch of older, starish players past their prime, led by a Hall of Fame manager going 40 and 120 and everybody embracing them. Like that is never going to happen again. But I grew up with those stories. So I kind of would prefer the White Sox not to break their record. So I disagree with Chris's sentiment.
I got to be honest, Evan, I love you very much because I think that you are the most passionate, the best representation of a Met fan possible. I disagree because I am tired of being the lovable losers, the LOL Mets. I want all that stuff to be washed aside. I want to be a good team, a competitive team. So all that history, it is what it is. It's long gone. If someone breaks that record, good for them. Let's move forward and be a dominant, respective team. That's what I'm looking for.
I agree with you when it comes to all the other stuff. When it comes to, 2007, 2008, or whatever example you want to give of LOL Mets. But 1962 is very unique, and it's not something I'm necessarily embarrassed by. And maybe it's because we weren't around. But for anyone who's not that familiar with why the Mets were that bad in 1962, can I tell you the quickest story ever, or like the quickest kind of thumbnail explanation for it? The Giants and Dodgers move away. A new team comes in 1962 is born, and their job was to how do we draw people to the Polo Grounds, to this dilapidated stadium? And basically what they did is they brought in washed up big name players. And they were managed by a washed up big name guy in Casey Stengel. It's like they weren't even trying to win. And it was an expansion team. And people were just so excited that we have a National League team after the Giants and the Dodgers left us. So it wasn't embarrassing. It was just different. And that's why when I hear, well, the White Sox aren't lovable. Well, no bad team is ever going to be lovable like that. It was a team that people were just so excited to have. I'm trying to think of how that could ever be. You know what? Here we go. I'm going to give you a modern example of how that could happen. If Major League Baseball handed Montreal an expansion team, okay? And the new owner of the Expos said, you know what I'm going to do? First year of the Expos, before we actually build a winner, we're going to bring in, Pedro Martinez is going to come in. He's going to start for us. We're going to bring him back. Why the hell not? Marquise Grissom's going to be our center fielder. We're going to bring in Will Cordero's son to be our shortstop. You know what I mean? Like just bringing in all this kind of history stuff to make people happy, to avoid looking at how bad the team is. And then eventually we'll win, which is what the Mets did. The Mets were the quickest team to go from expansion to a championship until the Diamondbacks and the Marlins kind of exploded that away. They were the quickest team to becoming a team in 62 to winning it all in 1969. Anyhow, I don't want to spend any more time on this because the truth is it doesn't matter. And I think most people just don't care. I don't think most Met fans care if the White Sox break the record or not. And like I said, I don't know if I care. I'm not going to lose sleep over it. In 2003, I remember watching the Tigers down the stretch of the year, but I think a part of that was I was unemployed. And I had the baseball package and nothing to do. So I think that's really what it came down to. Ralph writes, hey, they didn't F it up. Well, they almost could have, because if they had lost, we'd be bemoaning the fact that missing out on scoring opportunities, but they made it. Kudos to Manaea for 7 shutout innings, including getting out of the 7th inning jam with his pitch count rising. Kudos to Reed Garrett for a no-sweat 8th inning. And, of course, to Edwin Diaz for a blow-away 9th. And how about Francisco Lindor for breaking the ice with the homer? Kudos to Starling Marte for the huge hit in the 9th that gave him the insurance. And also to J.D. Martinez, top of the 9th, after first round 2 hitters made out. He got the 2-out walk that set up the Starling Marte double. Also, the September call-up paid dividends already, because JD might not have scored on Marte's hit. You're right. Pablo Reyes already paid some dividends. I think that's going to be his role on this team. I doubt he'll ever start a game. I doubt he'll ever be used as a pinch hitter unless there's an emergency situation. I have to admit, I was surprised, but I liked that Mendy went to Winker as quickly as he did. I think that showed you that he has confidence in the depth of this outfield, which they have a lot of. When you think about the amount of guys out there that can play the outfield, Brandon Nimmo, Harrison Bader, Starling Marte, Tyrone Taylor, Jesse Winker, and even Jeff McNeil. You have 6 guys. And because you have that many guys, I thought it made sense to pinch hit in the 4th inning with Jesse Winker, who's been so locked in recently, even though he went 0 for 2 in this game. And for anybody who was ripping those July 30th acquisitions, Jesse Winker has been a madman. He has certainly come through as one of those positive July 30th acquisitions.
Now, Jesse Winker is one of those guys where I hated when he was here, because I'm like, oh, here you go. This is the guy. He's probably going to be one of those guys who's going to perform against us, but not for us. And it's not true. He's actually done the exact opposite. He's actually had big hits, big performances, and he's won games for us.
And he's got to play. The Mets are about to play a 3-game series against the Boston Red Sox, in which Boston's going to throw 3 consecutive right-handers at him. And I think Jesse Winker's got to play against righties. Who sits? I think right now your boy's the guy who's the odd man out. Harrison Bader has not hit. He just hasn't. He's stellar defensively in center field. He can be valuable late as a defensive replacement. But I think right now, when you look at the Mets' best outfield, it's probably Winker, Nimmo, Marte, with Tyrone Taylor and Bader ready to come off the bench.
I got to be honest, dude. He hit the 88th home run for Daniel Vogelbach. I mean, how can you not?
that was a huge home run. I don't want that to be forgotten, because the Mets blew that game. So he does have the propensity to get a big hit. I still trust Bader in a big spot because of that. But, deciding playing time is tough. We talked about all the outfielders that they have right now, and that doesn't even include the fact that Jose Iglesias is still a guy I'd rather see out there just about every day. And if he's out there every day with the way Jeff McNeil's hit in the second half, and now you're pushing McNeil to the outfield, who's the odd man out? It makes it very difficult, but it's a good problem to have when you have a lot of players earning their playing time.
So I have a question for you. There's a guy named Francisco Lindor, hit his 20th home run of the season. Big home run, by the way. Put the Mets up 1-0 on Sunday. He's 1 home run and 5 stolen bases away from 30 home runs, 30 stolen bases, 30 doubles. Is he going to get that?
I mean, right now it feels like that. He has had a remarkable season. He really has. He's had such a good season that I was looking at his numbers the other day, the numbers you just started to lay out, and they're very good. I'm not going to insult him with what I'm about to say, but I was looking at his numbers, and again, they're very, very good. Great recovery from a terrible beginning to the season, and I was staring at them, and I thought to myself, I think he's actually having a better year than what those numbers say, which shows you how good of a year he's truly having. He's not going to win the MVP. I don't think he even should win the MVP. I think that Ohtani makes things easy, not because I'm in love with him, but because he is the best player on the best team. And sometimes things are just simple. And Shohei Ohtani's having an historic season. He's got 44 home runs and 43 stolen bases. And despite the fact he doesn't play the field, which is a big help towards Lindor, which is why Lindor is probably going to finish second or third in the NL MVP voting, which is huge for us as Met fans. When have the Mets ever had a guy finish second or third in the MVP voting? I think I asked that question recently on the Rico, like where, because we all know the Mets have never had an MVP. They have never had one in the history of this franchise. They've had no hitters now. They have never had an MVP. And I think I asked recently, where are their highest finishes? I know in 88, Straw and Kevin McReynolds kind of split the vote that allowed Kirk Gibson to win. David Wright had some high finishes. Carlos Beltran had some high finishes. I don't know if anybody since 88 finished second, though. Second or third. I think Lindor has that chance. But also, if you want to win the MVP, the Mets have to make the playoffs. That is an absolute must. In a world in which this many teams make the playoffs, can't miss the playoffs and be the MVP. Anyhow, the Red Sox come to town. If Hoff's up for it, I'm going to Monday night's game, Labor Day night, so we may have to plan a drive home Rico leaving that game. What?
Oh wait. Why do I not get an invite? You're going to all these fucking games. I'm not getting the fucking shit from you.
Well, first of all, you've gotten invites. Sometimes you can't come.
That's
and
true.
When I tell you who's coming with me. Sorry, ain't making the cut. I'm taking Jet. I'm taking my oldest son. I've got to run up games with my sons before this season's over. I got to the game on Saturday I'm excited for. I'm taking Spence. I'm taking my little guy. Just me and him. So I'm trying to rile up the father-son games before this season is over. But yes, Monday night against the Red Sox will be in the building. We'll try to do a drive home. Luis Severino against Brian Bayo. David Peterson, who's been great against Cutter Crawford in game 2 of this series. And then Tyler McGill against Tanner Houck will start the third game of this series. That should be, assuming Blackburn is ready to go, that should be Tyler McGill's final start, barring any other injury. And I would keep McGill on the roster in the long relief role. They did call up Alex Young, who deserves to be here, but it may not have to be Alex Young who goes down. Maybe it's Huascar Braziban. Who knows? Maybe it's DFAing Adam Bonavino. I have no idea. I think we'll worry about that when it comes. But those are the pitching matchups coming up against the Red Sox. I look at these 6 games because the Braves' schedule is about to soften up a little bit. It's 2 out of 3 in each series. I don't have to get nuts here and say they got to go 5-1. I think now, especially because they're a game back, so they've made up the ground they needed to make up. I think it's simply go in 2 out of 3 against the good Red Sox team, go in 2 out of 3 against the Cincinnati team. There is, Tankathon. I think if you're a football fan or if you're a basketball fan, you've probably been to Tankathon. Very popular website. I don't know if you guys realize there's a Tankathon for baseball. And I'm not looking at it because the Mets are tanking or anybody's tanking. But what they have on Tankathon is the strength of schedule for every remaining team. So I pulled that up earlier today just to see where the Mets are, to see where Atlanta is, San Diego, Arizona, all the teams they're rivals with. Of the 30 teams left in Major League Baseball, the 30 teams in Major League Baseball, where would you guess, Pete, with 1 being the toughest and 30th being the easiest, would be the remaining Mets schedule? Mets are playing the Phillies 7 times, Brewers, Braves, Red Sox, Nationals, Reds, and Blue Jays. Of 30 teams, 1 being the toughest, 30th being the easiest, where does their strength of schedule lie?
I want to say 10th.
You want to say 10th. 10th actually belongs to the New York Yankees. So maybe you were thinking about the other New York team. The New York Mets have the 4th toughest schedule remaining in Major League Baseball. They have 7 games left with the Philadelphia Phillies, 3 with the Milwaukee Brewers, who have run away with the NL Central, and 3 left with the Atlanta Braves, and obviously 3 with the Red Sox. Just think about those games. The Nationals, the Blue Jays, and the Reds are considered the softer opponents remaining. Concerning their rivals, the Arizona Diamondbacks have the 6th toughest schedule remaining. They've got 1 more game left with LA. They still have 7 with the Brewers. How weird is that? The Diamondbacks have not played the Brewers yet this season. They're going to play all 7 games coming up in the month of September. So Arizona's got the 6th toughest schedule remaining in Major League Baseball. The Atlanta Braves, 24th. That's the sucky reality. the 24th toughest schedule left in baseball. They've got 4 with LA, 3 with the Mets, 3 with the Royals. Those are considered their tough games. Here are their soft games. 3 with the Rockies. That's actually coming up this week. 3 with the Marlins, 2 with the Nationals, 4 with Cincinnati, 3 with Toronto. And then the San Diego Padres are 21st. So the Padres and the Braves, according to Tankathon, have the softer schedules. The Mets and the Diamondbacks have the tougher schedules. What does that mean? Does it mean the Mets can't make the playoffs? Doesn't mean the Mets can't make the playoffs. It just means they may not be getting as much help as we're hoping for. But here's the new reality we live in going into this series against Boston. We've always said everything's right in front of them. Well, now really everything's right in front of them because they're only a game back. So as long as the Mets win and they keep this winning going, everything is right there. So great road trip, 7-3. Could it have been better? Yes. Should it have been better? Yes. Did we have the season die a couple of times? Yes, it did. But guess what? We ain't done yet. So let's get set for Labor Day and an actual pennant race. Always email the pod to ricob@gmail.com. We'll give you a drive home Rico after their game against Boston Monday night, a series recap Wednesday night after they wrap it up against Boston. And you never know when we'll give you a pop-up Rico as things roll on during this pennant race as we enter September. Thank you very much for hanging out late or downloading and subscribing to another edition of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.